welcome to my channel on the best of fantasy. Today I'm going to talk about what I've learned about self-publishing over the last year and a half since I published my fantasy trilogy in 2023, beginning with The Way of Adan in March, and follow that up with The Prophet of Adan in June, and Return to Adan in September. Now, I had been working on this trilogy for about 18 plus years prior to publishing, and I did learn a lot in the process of self-publishing this trilogy. So I want to share with you today some of the things that I learned, some things that I think I did well, some of the things that I could have done better, in the hope that it will be useful to some of you who are thinking about self-publishing, or perhaps you're just curious about the process that I went through. And I have had, I will say, some modest success at this. It's been a joy. It has been a passion project for me, that's for sure. But it also has been modestly successful in financial terms as well. I did reach #1 in some of the categories on Amazon for a brief moment there, and also did very well in some of the other important categories. So I've had some success at this. I'm far from the most successful self-published fantasy author out there, however, so do keep that in mind. I'm just one person sharing my experience. If you're someone who has also self-published a fantasy trilogy or thinking about it, I would love to hear your comments and thoughts about anything I say in the video. Basically, I'm just trying to create a helpful discussion for people who are going to go through this process or are going through this process. So with that said, I'm not making any big promises here. I don't have any sponsors or anything like that. I will be mentioning specific platforms and products that I've been using, and I'm going to say exactly what I think about them. And I'm not there. I'm just going to be honest here. There's no slick editing or anything like that. Just to be telling you about my experience, and hopefully it'll be useful to some of you. So basically, there are two very important things that I want you to take away from this video. If there are just two things you take away, one, I hope it is do this thing, this project, this journey, because you love it. I already talked about this being a passion project. It is really not something you probably want to try to do for money. I think you're better off buying a lottery ticket. If I'm sure there are videos out there about getting rich from self-publishing, but this is not it. That is for sure. I'm sure you can find some of those on YouTube. Maybe some of them have even been made by people who've actually written books and self-published them. Who knows? But I am just here to say this should be something you do because you love it. It is not something you can do for the vast majority of us as a full-time job that will pay the bills. That said, there are a few people out there who are doing it successfully and paying the bills. And I think that they tend to write books that are very much page turners for the most part, books that they can write relatively quickly. If you're somebody crazy like me and you're tweaking and crafting your book for 18 plus years, then yeah, it's probably not going to be a way to make a living. So it's not something that certainly I and my family could have lived off all of these years while I was playing around with my books. But that said, I'm not doing this primarily to make a living from it. I'm doing it because I love it. That's why I'm here. I wouldn't mind making a living from writing, but that's really not the end goal here. The other thing I want to get across is the importance of networking. I'm going to be saying that word a lot, network and networking and all of that. There are some great communities out there, including the one that I feel like I'm part of here on YouTube. There are many ways that you can be involved in these mostly online communities, but sometimes they do meet up in real life at conferences or cons and that kind of thing. But social media is out there. On YouTube, leave comments on videos of YouTubers that who are talking about books that you love and people that you relate to. Maybe you want to start a channel yourself, although that is a huge commitment. That takes a lot of time out of your life and could be almost a full-time job itself, depending on how much you want to put into it. Yeah, talk to people, and obviously in the process, be kind, be a decent person, and you'll have a great time with that. I learned a lot from other self-published authors before I even really got started on self-publishing, and because there are a lot of really nice, kind people out there in the self-publishing fantasy community. So I've taken help from a lot of people, and some of the things that I'm going to tell you in this video are coming from them. But you will take a lot of joy from this process as well as you become part of these communities. So that actually is something worth doing in and of itself, because you're going to meet people who are passionate about the same kind of books that you love and love talking about. Now, there are some real benefits to self-publishing, one of them being creative freedom. That's the big one. It's very obvious that no one is going to tell you that you can't take this chance, or that you can't take this left turn here, or something of that nature. That is completely up to you when you're a self-published author. And there are other kinds of freedom as well, including, in my case, I published all 3 books in 1 year. I'm not sure if I would necessarily advise doing that, and most people aren't stupid enough or crazy enough to spend that much time on 3 books and then put them out in the world all at once. So that's probably not something most people have to worry about. But if you do happen to have 3 finished books or a series of books that you've finished and they're perfect and they're polished and you're ready to publish, I think maybe overall you would want to wait a little bit longer than 3 months in between each release. Just my experience there talking. Not that it was necessarily a bad thing, but it got to be a little exhausting, honestly. And I'm not sure that many of the readers were quite ready for that pace. So although, you hear a lot of readers who say, hey, I don't want to start a trilogy or a series until it's out there and complete and da-da-da. But I think probably a little more time. You don't need to wait a whole year, but maybe, more like 6 months or something like that. Now, obviously, there is a downside to self-publishing, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But you have to wear a lot of hats. It can be exhausting. You can feel like you're shouting into a void sometimes. And of course, you have to pay for everything on your own, and you have to be able to find the money to do that. So those are some serious downsides, I suppose. But again, if you're really passionate about it, a lot of these sacrifices will feel like, yeah, they're worth it. Some of the topics I'm going to discuss now include engaging an editor, an artist, a cover designer, a map maker, maybe even, also formatting, what kind of software you can use for that, what platform do you want to publish on, and how that platform works briefly. I will cover just a little bit about special editions and audiobooks, whether or not to do a special edition or an audiobook. When should you do that? How do you do it? Hardest of all, marketing, including how to get reviews and how to deal with reviews and other ways that you can get the word out about your book, including contests like SPFBO, which I am part of as a judge. So I will talk about that in a little bit. But let's assume that you have written a book, okay? And I'm assuming, along with that you have also revised that book again and again and again. You have put your life energy into this book and made it as beautiful as you can. You've had your friends and your family look at it and maybe give you suggestions, and you've tweaked it and you've worked on it. So you've edited the heck out of this book, and it's as good as it gets, until you get another set of eyes to look at it. And this is where, this does very much depend on your budget. Now, I cannot recommend enough the idea of using an editor. Now, you can have, this can come in a couple varieties. There is a copy editor, somebody who looks at all your spelling and your commas and cleans up your manuscript for you, helps you with that. And then there's a developmental editor who looks at more of the big picture stuff, looks at the integrity of the story, maybe gives you a little heads up, like, hey, some of your readers might not like this, or perhaps helps you to be more consistent in your storytelling. Will tell you where to remove big sections, or maybe something needs to be added. So those are the 2 kinds of editors. Some editors will do both. Sometimes you can hire someone to be both a copy editor and a developmental editor. But some will only do one or the other. So you'll have to shop around if that's something you can afford. But do be warned, the real professionals out there are not cheap. We're talking about thousands of dollars. It's a huge investment. There are websites you can go to that give you the rates that these professionals will charge. And they do need to charge that much because that's how they earn their living. And they put a lot of time and a lot of effort into this editing. Now, in my case, I couldn't be happier with the professional help that I got from my developmental editor. I did not use a copy editor. One of the benefits of being an English professor for about 30 years is that I think I know where commas go at this point, and I'm pretty good at copy editing myself because I'm always grading papers and that sort of thing. So, but I did employ a developmental editor. His name is A.P. Canavan. He also has a YouTube channel. It's called A Critical Dragon. He has done this type of thing, developmental editing, for a lot of authors, self-published and traditionally published. In fact, he is an advanced reader for Malazan author Stephen Erickson and Ian Esselmont, among others. So he really knows his business, and I thoroughly enjoyed working with him. And I do feel genuinely that he helped me to make the books even better, even at a point when I felt like, what else can I do here to make this book better? To get a professional set of eyes on your manuscript, if you can afford it. Again, and I do realize there are a lot of people out there who cannot, and that is just, that you have to work within the budget that you can come up with. But if it is a sacrifice that you can make, I do recommend it, and I do recommend you look around for people like A.P. Canavan, people who are really good at what they do and have professional credentials. Now, where can you find these people? Where do you find these editors, copy editors and developmental editors? Well, there are a lot of these people who are part of these communities that I've been talking about. So if you're on social media, you're on X or Instagram, there's a very good chance that a lot of people who are involved in these communities will know of good editors. Some of them are editors themselves. That's a real benefit to being in these communities, is that you will easily get in touch with professionals of that sort. There are also websites out there, organizations like Readsy. I have not used Readsy myself, but I do know about it, and it is a place where you can go to find not only editors, but also artists, cover designers, you name it, anybody who's involved in the production of a self-published book. Basically, you'll find it. I think you can get in touch with reviewers, all kinds of people. So there are organizations. The one that I know of the most is Readsy. There may be others, but that's another way to help you with your research, to make it a little bit easier for yourself. Now, I also highly recommend that you hire an artist. I strongly recommend that you do not use AI in any way, shape, or form, simply because there are a lot of people who will not touch your book if there is AI involved anywhere. And also, if you're hiring an artist, if you can afford to, you are also supporting another creative person out there. And it's an important relationship that can be a big part of the success of your book. Also recommend a cover designer. Sometimes, once again, you can have an artist who is also a cover designer, so a two-in-one. But oftentimes, a lot of artists don't do cover design, and you will have to hire a cover designer. I do recommend doing that. I thought for a little while about doing my own cover design, and I'm so glad that I hired the person I hired, who is actually Jack Shepard, who is also my map maker, and I could not be more pleased with the map that Jack did for me for the trilogy. The artist, by the way, is a friend of my daughter's named Kira Gregory. Just delighted with the teamwork that Kira and Jack did on the covers. And the great thing about self-publishing, once again, is I had a lot of input with those covers. I had the idea of doing the stained glass windows, and they were able to work with me that way. That is not something you get in traditional publishing for the most part, where an author has a lot of say over the appearance of the cover. So that was a real fun thing, to work on the covers with those people, and hire people that you're comfortable with. Again, networking, getting to know people online, being part of a community is extremely helpful. I found some really wonderful people to work with. I couldn't be happier with that part of the process. Now, in terms of formatting the book, the inside of the book, and making it look, like a book and looking nice, there are actually a lot of software programs these days. It used to be the case that self-published authors would have to do all this manually, which was a huge task. But there are all kinds of software programs out there these days to help you format your book and give you the nice looking chapter headings and even the little, sometimes you can put in little symbols and other things at the beginning of chapters. But the program that I used is called Vellum. I'm extremely happy with it. It is, even for someone like me who's not very tech savvy, I was able to figure things out relatively easily. And simply when it was time to upload my manuscript onto the platform where I was publishing it, it was very simple, and I had no issues whatsoever with the PDF that Vellum helped me to produce, as well as the ebook. Actually, it did both for me very nicely, very easily, and it was easy to work with as well. So there are little quirks here and there, I'm sure, with all these programs, and Vellum is not the only one. I want to emphasize that. It's just the one I worked with. By the way, Vellum also is only compatible with a Mac. So that's a downside to Vellum. You'd have to have a Mac to be able to use Vellum. But again, there are other programs out there that you can use to format your book. Now you need to decide on a platform that you're going to use to publish your book. And the big one that everybody has probably heard of is KDP, which is Amazon's publishing platform. And this was something that I was in conversation with several authors about. I acknowledged them in my acknowledgments because they were so helpful to me in deciding where to publish my book. Now, when it comes to the ebook, it became clear to me, and all the advice I heard was that it's probably in my best interest to go with Amazon KDP for the ebook. There are some issues with this. There are some people who just do not want to deal with Amazon. And once in a while, I'll have someone say, hey, is your ebook available on any other place? I'd like to buy it, but I don't want to deal with Amazon. And you just have to say no, because Amazon basically gets an exclusive deal when you work with them for the ebook. Now, the physical book is different, so we'll talk about that in a second. But for the ebook, Amazon has just a huge share of the market. And if you don't go with Amazon, then you're probably giving up on a lot of potential customers for your book. That's just how it is at the moment. So I chose to work with the giant on the ebook, and Amazon does what it does really well. I have no complaints about the ease with which I was able to upload my ebook, and all the instructions from Amazon were actually super clear. They have made their platform very easy to work with, I must say. And I feel like it was probably the best way for me to get the word out. And I do recommend enrolling your book in KDP Select, where people who subscribe to Amazon's Kindle Unlimited can also pick up your book. And that's a subscription service, if you're not familiar with it, where you pay a monthly fee in order to access essentially as many books as you want to read that are enrolled in KDP Select. So yeah, I think I have no regrets really about using Amazon for the ebook. Now, I've also used Amazon as well as another platform to publish the physical book, the paperback, that is. And I had some reasons for this. Number one, I mentioned not everyone likes to work with Amazon. So that actually includes libraries and pretty much every other bookstore. So if you want other bookstores, such as Barnes & Noble, to pick up your book and sell it, at least online, because when you're self-publishing, you're not going to typically be able to put your books in physical bookstores, except for the odd independent bookstore here and there. God bless them for being heroes and championing indie books, but that is the exception. So for the most part, if you do want, though, Barnes & Noble online to sell your book and other online bookstores in various places, you need to go with some other service. Now, I chose Ingram Spark, which is also one of the best known platforms for self-publishing your book. And it is actually about less than 10% of my sales are from Ingram Spark, but that's still roughly 10%. That's a significant number of sales. So those are people, individuals who did not want to work with Amazon, didn't want to buy from Amazon, libraries, bookstores, you name it. So some of my sales come from books produced by Ingram Spark. I found that process to be slightly more tedious than working with Amazon KDP, but again, it was something that I was able to figure out with help from my cover designer, who really helped me get the covers just right for these. And they are different. You have to make the covers slightly different. They have to be differently formatted for Amazon versus Ingram Spark, or for KDP rather, versus Ingram Spark. So you do need to follow those directions, or hire someone who's capable of doing that. But yeah, there are pros and cons, obviously, to using these various platforms. And after researching it, that's what I decided to do. But there are many other platforms out there for self-publishing. And I do encourage you to do your homework, do your research, find the one that will best fit you and your plans and your desires. There are just a lot of other ones out there that I read about, and some of them had some really appealing traits to them. They had some things over Amazon and Ingram Spark, but in the end, those are the two that I decided to work with, and I'm pretty happy about how that's gone. And in terms of the physical book and the appearance, there's not a huge difference, but I can usually tell the difference between an Ingram Spark cover and a KDP cover. The Ingram Spark cover is just a little more vibrant, I would say, overall. But I've also had a couple quality issues with those, so it's really kind of 6 of one, half a dozen of the other in terms of the quality, I would say. Now, let's move on to the special editions. So this is something that I think you should start to consider only when your book has enough traction. Now, I am very fortunate myself to be working with the Broken Binding right now on a special edition of my first book, The Way of Adan, and subsequently The Prophet of Adan and Return to Adan. And that has been just a dream come true in many ways. But I think that a lot of people these days, a lot of self-published authors, are doing Kickstarters when they're coming up with special editions. That is something I would encourage you to think about only when, again, you've had enough sales, you have enough of the word out, really. You have to have the word out enough that it's going to be worthwhile. And it's not always the easiest thing to do to have a successful Kickstarter. There are a lot of them out there. So I think it's a market that is getting increasingly flooded with more people trying to come up with these special editions. And they're great. They're wonderful. I mean, people love collecting beautiful books. Yeah, it's something that I think you need to probably study the marketing side of this a little bit before you think about a special edition, but it's something to keep in mind. And we'll be talking about marketing a bit in a moment. Same thing really with audiobooks. Keep in mind that unless you're going to do your audiobook yourself, and by the way, that is just way harder than probably most people think, you're going to spend a lot of money on an audiobook because you pay by the finished hour. So let's say my first book is 165,000 words. That's going to translate to about 18, 19 hours of an audiobook. And I'm going to be paying per hour my narrator. Now, the rates can vary a lot. You can pay for, at the very lowest end, for maybe a beginner, somebody who's not a professional, somebody who's not maybe invested in as much in it yet. You're going to pay at least $100 even there. And you can easily pay on the higher end up to $400 per finished hour. That's expensive. That gets to be very expensive. So yeah, it's not something you want to do again until maybe you feel like it's going to be worthwhile. And also, by the way, it needs to meet certain quality standards in order to be uploaded onto a platform like Audible, for example. Again, yeah, I'm probably going to go with the giant here for the audiobook as well. But you have to meet their very strict requirements. It has to be a very clean, quality recording. And that takes a lot of effort. That takes a lot of engineering. So it's just there's a lot that goes into producing an audiobook. And the people, the narrators, it's just a ton of work. What they get paid is actually, it's really fair, I would say. And so, yeah, you're going to need to sell a lot of copies of your audiobook to make a profit on it. That is for sure. And I feel very fortunate once again to be working with someone, happens to be another YouTuber named Alan from the Library of Alexandria, who is just about done with the audiobook for The Way of Adan. I'm very excited about that because I think he's done a brilliant job. If you like a narrator who does lots of different voices, then you're probably going to enjoy Alan's narration. He's just brilliant at voices. It's going to be a really fun audiobook to listen to, I think. But yeah, I have no idea whether or not I'll make money on it. I guess we'll see. But again, it's a passion project. And once again, note how I found my narrator through networking. Alan is a friend, somebody I met here on YouTube by interacting with other channels and getting to know people and just jumping into the community. So yeah, I couldn't be happier with my audiobook narrator as well. Now let's talk about marketing. This is the hardest part, I think, at least for someone like me. I'm not a natural marketer by any means. Like most people who love books and writing and that sort of thing, I'm really more of an introvert. I'm not a salesperson at all. And yeah, there's just a lot I had to learn in this process. Should you hire, if you're someone like me who is pretty much ignorant about marketing and very reluctant to do it, should you hire a book marketer? Honestly, I don't know. I have not done it. I am actually pretty wary of that. I've been approached by people who call themselves book marketers. Some of them just flat out offer reviews for money, and I'm pretty sure that's unethical at the very least, but pretty bogus as well. So there are a lot of these people out there who are going to try to take advantage of you and your dream. I would say stay away from them. That said, I'm sure there are some very legit book marketers out there, people who actually will do their very best to make your book as successful as possible. I know they're out there. I just have not used their services, so I can't really comment on that. But I would say look in the acknowledgments of some of the books that you love, particularly self-published ones, and see if any of them mention their book marketer. I mean, people should if book marketers have helped them to sell books. So that is maybe one way you can find that person. But I guarantee you, if you get involved in these communities on X or on Instagram, and it becomes known that you're looking for a book marketer, you will find book marketers out there. They're out there. Not that hard to find, I think. But yeah, make sure they are legit is all I would say. But my advice really boils down once again to networking. And, I've been on YouTube. I have this channel that has been an immense help for me to get the word out about my trilogy for sure. That has been a great advantage. Of course, I have had to work my butt off for 4.5 years to build this channel into what it is. And there's no guarantee of success there, really. It's just a lot of hard work, and it's a joy also because you're part of this community of people who are passionate about fantasy or whatever your genre might be. So I have found it to be very much worth it. And again, if you're thinking in monetary terms, starting a YouTube channel is like writing a book. You're better off buying a lottery ticket. It's not something you would typically do to make a ton of money, because you're not going to make a ton of money usually as a booktuber or what have you. And it's very competitive. There's a lot of channels out there, a lot of people, but it could be a way for you to establish a core readership, that 100 people or 1,000 people who will help you spread the word about your books, which is great. As far as other platforms go, there's X, formerly known as Twitter, still known as Twitter to a lot of people, and Instagram. I am not on Instagram. I probably should be because that is a place where I think a lot of things are shared. But my impression of X and Instagram are these are good places for making announcements, just kind of in a very superficial, shallow way, getting the word out, just getting eyes on your book, which is in and of itself a worthwhile thing. The more people who see your book, even if it's just briefly, the better. And I think that X and Instagram are good platforms for that. But as far as deep, meaningful discussions or real deep friendships and that sort of thing, I don't think they're quite as conducive to as say YouTube is for that sort of thing. But I do recommend getting involved and being part of these communities on those platforms. Facebook, I am not active at all on Facebook, but I do know a few authors who are. I think that it's these days maybe not as effective as a way of getting the word out. That's my impression. I could be wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong. But there are some established authors who do have a healthy Facebook following and use that platform to stay in touch with their followers, which is perfectly legitimate. But I don't know if it's necessarily the greatest for a new author to try to build a platform on Facebook. But again, if you're someone out there who's a relatively new author and you've built a big platform and on Facebook, and let me know. And finally, there's Reddit, and I just want to say, if you're going to Reddit to market yourself, well, don't actually, because they don't allow you to market your book on Reddit. I am not involved myself on Reddit. It's a great community as far as I have seen, in terms of just talking about books that you're passionate about, getting advice about books and all that. But they don't want authors there who are touting their own books. So that's not something to even consider as far as that platform goes. Now, speaking of all these platforms, what about advertising? This is something that I'm just beginning to dip into myself. I have consulted with some really kind people, some very gracious people, and after listening to people who are much smarter than I am in this realm, I have decided to do some advertising on Amazon. And Amazon ads, I still feel a little bit lost in the wilderness here. I have heard mixed things about the effectiveness of ads on various places, but after talking to people who actually do really know what they're talking about, I decided that let's give this a shot. And the way Amazon ads work, just briefly, is that essentially you put out a bid, you put out a number you're comfortable with, and usually it's something in the like 40 something cents. And if somebody's searching for epic fantasy, and you have basically said that's a category I want people to look at for my book, then you're competing with other people who have that same category. The highest bidder gets their ad put out in front of the person searching on Amazon. And if that person clicks on that ad, then you get charged that 40 something cents just for that. The person doesn't have to buy the book, but if they click on the ad, you get charged. So you need to have some return on that, obviously. You need to have at least a certain percentage of people who actually buy the book to make the ad worthwhile. So that's a calculus that I'm just beginning to figure out. I have waded into that. If you are someone who's shopping around on Amazon and you're searching for something and you see somebody's ads, I encourage you not to click on them if you don't think you're actually really likely to buy the book, because that poor person is getting charged when you click on their ad. But if it does look like something promising, they want you to click on their ad, of course. And if you end up not buying it, well, that's okay. But yeah, it is something that's a bit of a risk. You have to figure out where your bid is going to be and how much you're willing to spend on this kind of thing. And it'll take a little while for me even to figure out if this is a worthwhile investment. So other places that I have heard about, I have not used, one would be BookBub, and I think a lot of authors do like that one. And as it sounds, it's more book-centric. And then there are Facebook ads. Again, I have not used it, so I can't speak to the effectiveness, though I have paid attention to conversations, and I have heard the majority of people that I've listened to say that the Facebook ads are not really that effective these days. But again, this is basically hearsay coming from me, so look into it yourself if you're curious about that. Now, one really great way to network and to market at the same time is to get involved in contests. Submit your book to a contest. There are lots of them out there, and they include SPFBO. I mentioned earlier I am a judge for SPFBO. This is the Self-Published Fantasy Blog-Off, probably the best known contest out there for self-published fantasy. It was founded by Mark Lawrence in order to shine a light on self-published fantasy, and I am very honored to be a judge for that contest. So I have not submitted my own book because I'm a judge. Obviously, that would be a conflict of interest, but it's really great to be involved as a judge. But what happens here is that I mentioned Facebook a little while ago. One vibrant community on Facebook is the SPFBO community, and you can become part of this when you submit your book. And you basically share your triumphs and your woes with all the other authors who are part of this contest. 300 books get into this contest, and they are judged by judges like myself, lots of teams out there who work for this contest for free. It's just something we all do out of passion. But it's a wonderful community to be part of once again. And if you're one of the fortunate whose book goes through and becomes one of the 10 finalists out of those 300 submissions, you get a lot of light on your book. And these people do see boosts in their sales. So it's really just a great thing. And of course, the winner of the contest will have lots of publicity from that. So that's great, and it's all free in the case of SPFBO. There are other contests where you do pay a slight fee to be part of it, and I'm not terribly knowledgeable about these other ones, but other contests that I've heard of, that I've seen on the periphery at least, include BBNYA. There's also the Indie Ink Awards, and my book, The Way of a Dan, was actually nominated by readers for that. That's how that one works. It works a little differently. So readers nominated it, so it got entered into that last year, and I think we're waiting to hear. But it did become a finalist in several categories, actually 9 categories. Kind of blew me away, actually. And that was based on votes by readers and such. So yeah, we're waiting to hear about the winners of that contest, hopefully soon. You have the Indie Ink Awards, BBNYA, SPFBO. These are the ones that I know a little bit about at least. And there are others out there. Be careful with these. There are some that do charge larger fees to be part of, and you need to figure out if that is actually a worthwhile investment for you. Now, hopefully with all this networking you've been doing, you have met some booktubers, you've met some bloggers, people who are happy and ready to review self-published fantasy. There are lots of them out there. And hopefully some of them will be willing to pick up your book, but you have to ask often. And that's just part of the deal. And when you give your book to one of these people, and it's up to you whether you want to invest in giving a physical book or going the slightly cheaper route, giving them an ebook, which essentially costs you nothing. But that is up to you. You may want to be strategic about that. But you want to be very courteous when you offer your book to reviewers. And some of them will say no, some of them will say yes, and just be gracious no matter what. Because they may be people, even if they say no at the moment, they may be able to get to your book later on. But yeah, stay positive and be courteous. I would say it's good to make an effort to get to know these people before you just give them a message and say, hey, read my book. You want to be, I think, diplomatic when you present your book to someone as a potential reviewer. But you have to ask. The bottom line is you have to ask. If you don't ask, people won't pick up your book. And another really important thing is once you've done it, there are no strings attached. If you give your book to a reviewer, they're under no obligation. It is a gift. They may not be able to get to your book right away. They may never get to it. That's just how it is. So you can't really attach strings to a book when you give it to a reviewer. That's why you really want to communicate with them. But the fact of the matter is, these reviewers are doing it most of the time for free. And they have, if they're anything like me, a whole backlog of books that they need to get to. So yeah, it is in fact, I have stopped accepting books at this point that outside of SPFBO and my buddy reads here on YouTube, and the books that I already have from authors, just because there are too many. I can't get to them all that I need to get to as fast as I want to. And a lot of people are in that boat. But there are lots of people out there who will take your book. You just have to keep trying. And keep in mind that, once again, there are no strings attached once you give that away. And that means when they review your book, if they do give you a negative review, stay away. Stay away from negative reviews, period. Negative reviews on Goodreads and Amazon and other places. You will have some trolls out there who don't even read your book and try to review bomb you. That is something you can sometimes do something about. In my experience on Amazon, you'll be able to get rid of those. It's a little bit harder on Goodreads to get rid of those. Sometimes Goodreads will just ignore you when you point out that the person who is review bombing you hasn't read your book. Goodreads is less likely to intervene. Yeah, in general, just stay away from negative reviews. Do not engage with people who review your books negatively. I personally think it's not a good idea to check Goodreads and Amazon for reviews. especially the negative ones, because your state of mind should not depend on someone else's opinion of your book. Then again, you may want to thank the people who do give you positive reviews. There's nothing wrong with that. You want to stay out of their space, but if there's an easy, elegant way to thank them, then I think that's a great thing to do. But in general, the less you get involved with the reviews, the better. Let them do their thing. And I personally feel that it's in your best mental health interest to stay away from reviews as much as possible. And in terms of feedback, there will be people, reviewers, who offer you some feedback in the course of reviewing your books, which is great. You can take that into consideration. I think ultimately, though, if you've hired a developmental editor, that is the person to listen to the most. And that's it. Those are all my thoughts for now, at least on self-publishing, the journey that I have undertaken myself, and I couldn't be happier. I found it to be such a liberating decision once I decided to take the plunge and self-publish. It's been a ton of work. It's been worth every second of it, though, and I am so fortunate to have made some really wonderful friendships, relationships with other people who are passionate about fantasy and about storytelling. So I encourage you to just go for it. Put in that time and effort. Your passion will carry you far. And I wish you much fulfillment with your writing and with the self-publishing process if you decide to take the dive.